Welcome to Mark 14. To those that have been travelling with us through the whole series, you would recognise that Mark is bringing us now to the real pointy end of things and is making some very clear lines in the sand. In case we'd missed the pointers up to here, Mark now says, look, I just need to tell you what the lay of the land is. So Mark 14, now the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread were only 2 days away, and the chief priests and the teachers of the law were scheming to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him. That's verse 1. So right now the bad guys have been outed. Mark has been giving us enough clues to this point, and there it is. The agenda is to kill him. But not during the festival, they said, or the people may riot. So not only are they Jesus' enemies, and not only are they in religious positions of authority, but they're also, in a sense, politicians and manipulators of the masses as well. So in contrast to this decision that was made in secret and made for negative or destructive reasons, we move on to a very powerful passage that Mark records in verse 3, where he says, while Jesus was in Bethany reclining at a table in the home of Simon the leper. Now that's significant. Look who Jesus is being accepted by. Look who is being rejected by. A woman came, again another minority, a disenfranchised group, came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages. So we're dealing with a significant amount of money here. And then the money could have been given to the poor, and they rebuked her harshly. Leave her alone, said Jesus. Why are you bothering her? She's done a beautiful thing for me. So it's an interesting two sets of lenses that are being contrasted here. The woman does this thing publicly. The decision to kill Jesus is made privately. The people who've rejected Jesus are the religious leaders, the political movers, the people with power and money. The people who have accepted and adopted and now anointed Jesus as king are those who are disenfranchised and outside of those structures. It's an interesting thing also around the contrasting values around money. We're going to see in just a moment in the Last Supper where Judas Iscariot betrays Jesus and does so for a price. And we need to note the role that money plays in this conversation as well. And we need to be paying attention too in our modern church and in our modern era where money goes, what it's being spent on, what it's not being spent on, who gets to make the decisions around money. Tell us a lot about the groups and the environments and the churches that are using the money. Interesting, the perspective. One is like, this could have been sold for a year's worth of food for the poor. And Jesus says, look, the other lens is this. She's anointed me, and it's an anointing for burial. It's also an anointing of kingship, and she recognizes this way. And you might think, well, this is kind of a old conversation, but it's not. I'm just thinking about our church here for those who are part of Edwardstown Baptist. We've had conversations here, pragmatics versus statements of value, which is what the anointing is. It's a statement of value versus the pragmatic approach of feeding the poor. We've had conversations here, and we're still trying to work through, do we put an elevator on the edge of our community centre here? Well, an elevator here would cost us $100,000. $100,000 to get people from here to here. Well, we have steps already. And $100,000 could do a lot of things. Who would it service? Well, the conversation has been those who have disability or those who are unable to take the 2 flights of steps to get to the second floor because of maybe age or infirmity. Now, could we use that $100,000 in a more practical way, maybe to feed people or to develop a children's program or spend on our teenagers or sign something like that? Well, of course we could. Well, what lens are we looking through? Well, who are we valuing when we spend our money in particular ways? And how we spend our money says everything about what we value. By the way, that conversation is still ongoing because I recognize that a $100,000 elevator is going to service probably 5% of our church community. The pragmatic view is probably going to benefit like the 95%. So watch this space. We'll see what happens there. And then we move to the Last Supper, verse 12 through 26. Interesting that the whole event around Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection really is triggered around this event, the Passover event. So my question is, why does Jesus actually rejig or retool an existing ceremony that the Jews were very, very familiar with, instead of creating his own? Why take a culturally well understood practice that had implications and values that the people generally understood, and why retool that for the future instead of just like wiping the slate clean and starting with something new? Well, this is the way Jesus always does it, doesn't he? He never just says, well, we're going to start with something you don't understand and have no history with. Jesus always takes something that we're familiar with, something that has existing value, and then reshapes it and reforms it, redeems it, in order to move us forward into the narrative of following Jesus, the Messiah, rather than following the laws of Moses, the lawgiver. And Jesus does this in our life too. So this whole process is initiated by a betrayal. And at this point, if you've read the chapter, and I would encourage you to read through the chapter, we're going to then see a lot of different things happen that take Jesus down the path towards his eventual crucifixion. And I've made a list here. I'd like to read them to you. And I think it's important that we hear them all in one breath or one stream of words, because until you hear them backed up on top of each other, it actually, you don't realize how shocking this is, the things that had to happen in order for Jesus to be crucified. So the first thing is, the whole process is initiated by a betrayal of Judas Iscariot. Judas is motivated by money, recognizes at some point here that Jesus is not the kind of Messiah that he was waiting for, and finds a way to turn him in. So the next thing is we've got an abuse of power by the Pharisees that kicks things off here. We've got a betrayal by an associate, that's Judas. And I often wonder, why did Jesus not try to talk Judas out of it? Why did he not just pull Judas aside and say, Judas, I'm Jesus, I know stuff. This idea that you have of betraying me, it's going to go bad. It's going to go so bad. Not just for me, but it's going to go badly for you. I really would like you to reconsider and be a reasonable and wise person. But what is intriguing and baffling to me here is the fact that Jesus does not try to talk Judas out of this. Does not. Then there's denial by an inner associate. That's Peter. Peter denies that he knows Jesus when given the opportunity to affirm his relationship. So in the courtyard there at the trial, Jesus is denied his associates. His inner band of people, they disperse, they run, they disappear, and they are nowhere to be seen. So his tribe abandons him. Then there is violence. I don't know if you've actually paid attention to the violence that's done to Jesus in the middle of this chapter. Chapter 14, verse 62, when Jesus is asked, "Are you the Messiah?" and he uses the words, "I am." Very significant. If you've got an Old Testament history there, you'll understand that one. And you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. A reference to Daniel. Very much they understood this apocalyptic language of the return of the Messiah, the Son of God. The chief priest, the high priest, tears his clothes. Now, you've got to understand the ornate clothing that these priests wear. It's like, this is not just some like a glad wrap garbage bag that he goes, and he rips. It's like, this is like serious and ornate buttons and cloth and stuff, and he's grunting because he's an old man, and he's pulling, and it's work, and it's shocking to watch as he literally rips his clothes apart as a sign of what he considers to be blasphemy. They all condemned him as worthy of death. And then listen to this, verse 65. Then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, and they struck him with their fists. And they said, "Prophesy." And the guards took him and beat him. I'd always had in my head this picture of Jesus, like, it's horrible with the whips, and I know that. But the violence, human on human, of a fist to a face, or a fist to the ribs, or a fist to the back. This is what they're doing to Jesus. So it's an illegal and it's a dishonest trial. This trial should never have happened. It broke a number of Jewish rules when they had Jesus on trial. There's bullying from the Roman soldiers. This is the way that humanity treats its Messiah. In contrast, if you take the chapter you read about Jesus' response to the circumstances, was twofold. Jesus' response was twofold. Number one was the humility of choosing God's path. Even at the point where he's in Gethsemane and he has a question, he says, Father, is there another way? Yet not my will be done, but your will be done. So it's the pathway of submission, and it's also the pathway of struggle. Jesus struggles and then Jesus submits, as opposed to the pathway that the world moves things forward, which is a path of bullying, violence, manipulation, and abandonment. And the two paths could not be clearer. And as the followers of Jesus in the early church are called to follow the ways of Jesus, not the ways of the world. And you've got to understand the church at this point is under pressure, and they are about to experience some of the same things that Jesus has experienced. Bullying, political pressure, manipulation, many people abandoning, and the choice has been put before the church in terms of what path they will walk. I don't know if that pathway is going to become our pathway at some point. It wouldn't surprise me if it does. And I think the choices might be as stark for us: the path of questioning and submitting, or the path of the world, which is all of these things which eventually, of course, end up leading to the crucifixion of Jesus. It's a difficult passage, and the things that they did to Jesus were horrible. But he did this so that the character, the love, the personhood of God could be known by us, and it could change us. How incredible that this most horrible of events would be the most transformative event that humanity's ever seen. I trust it's been transformative for you. God bless you. We'll see you in Mark 15.